First of all, commercial leadership. One of the biggest or greatest misconceptions in aesthetics is that revenue alone equals success. But high demand without margin control, operational discipline and financial structure can create enormous pressure behind the scenes. Our next speaker brings clarity to the commercial realities of scaling an aesthetic business. Andrew Cox is co-founder of National Cosmetic Partnership, founder of Cardinal Mark, one of Australia's leading healthcare transaction advisory firms. Over more than 30 years of over 30 years of investment banking, Andrew has led major healthcare transactions involving organisations such as Healthscope, Genesis Care, Ramsay Health, Sonic Healthcare. What I value most about Andrew is his ability to see clearly, not emotionally, but commercially. He understands exactly what strong businesses look like operationally, financially, and strategically in our industry. It's so unique. Every time I speak to him, I leave thinking differently. So my advice is really simple for this session, is listen really carefully and learn. Please welcome Andrew Cox.
Thank you very much. I don't know about that seeing clearly bit. For those that were here a little early, you might have seen me trying 2 pairs of glasses to see which ones were going to work. So, we'll see. For those that were here in the previous session, my key takeaway is that brilliance requires discipline. And so my job here is to tell you a bit about what that discipline looks like in practice. There's a nice big picture of me. If I'm really honest, it's maybe a slightly younger version of me, so I hope that's not too confusing. And this is the bit where I'm supposed to brag about myself. Susie's already helped with that a little bit. I want to talk about what's not on the slide here. For many, many years, for all my career, in fact, I've spent my time advising other people on their businesses and what to do with them. And it wasn't until quite recently that I've had occasion to start my own businesses, which of course gave me a completely different perspective on just how hard that is. And so what it's taught me is to have huge respect for everybody in this room and anybody else that started their own business, because it's really not an easy journey. So our topic, the economics of a thriving aesthetics business. And I guess the key word in that for me is the word thriving. What is thriving? So is thriving when you ask yourself, we're always super busy, isn't that great? Is that thriving? We're super busy. Is it thriving when our socials have serious traction? I'm not really a socials guy, so I had to look up that little phrase using AI, but there it is. Our socials always have traction. No, that is not thriving. We've got a great team. I've heard that before. We've got such a great team. It's a great business we've built. That is not thriving. There's good money left for us. Why do I use the word left? Because you've paid for all your stock, you've paid for all your staff. At the end of the day, oh look, thank goodness there's some profit left at the end for me. That is not a thriving business either. So what is thriving? Thriving is an ecosystem. The reason we use the word the economics of thriving is because it's not one thing, it's an economic system. You need to be profitable, that's obvious. You need to be sustainable. I'm going to talk about each of these in detail. You need to be scalable, and finally transferable. Now, I found that a bit hard to remember, so I then spent probably an inordinate amount of time in preparation coming up with 4 words starting with the letter R to explain all of that. And so here they are. Returns. To be profitable means you generate returns. And again, I'll come back to each of these, so there's no need to conceptualise them fully just yet. Profitable returns. Sustainable, that means repeatable. It means that the profit you're making today can be repeated tomorrow and the next day, ideally, without having to put the same effort in every single time. That's what sustainable means. Scalable. Scalable means you can replicate it. It's great that you're profitable now. It's great that you can do it sustainably. Can you now grow your business and replicate what you've already done successfully at this size, but now at this size? And then the last one, transferable, I use the word replaceable. What that means is eventually, at some point in time, can you replace yourself and can your business still survive? So they are the 4 things that you need to achieve, in my opinion at least, to claim that you have a thriving business. And it's surprising how often you'll have some of those, but not necessarily all of them. Let's look at each in turn. So starting with profitable. For those that were here, it wasn't here, it was at the Gold Coast, which is where all proper conferences should in fact be. But for those who were here last year, my talk was about being profitable. It wasn't about the economics, it was just about the profitability. And I did a quick run through some language that you need to talk about and understand to understand the concept of profitability. I'm going to repeat that really quickly here. So there's the language essentially: revenue, gross profit, and EBIT. They're the three key levels, the 3 key concepts. What is revenue? Revenue is the money that you collect from your customers. Gross profit is the money you earn. In other words, after you've taken the money from your customers and paid your suppliers, that's the money available to you within your business. That's the money you earn. And then your EBIT is the money you keep before interest and tax, but it's the money that you get to keep. So you've converted the money you've earned into what you get to keep before tax. That's EBIT. And then the other concepts quickly are, number 1, what is the gap between revenue and gross profit? That's your cost of sales. And then what is the bridge between your gross profit and your EBIT? And there are 2 really key categories there. The first is the wages you pay your staff, and that's the biggest one. And then there's all of the other expenses, which we call OPEX, operating expenditure. And really importantly, what many clinics out there don't do is think about how much you have to pay yourself as a wage. Your wages have to include your own wage to give a true view of what is profitable. Now, you may not choose to pay your wage normally through a payroll system, and in fact you probably shouldn't be because it's not tax efficient, but when you look at the profitability of your business, you've got to look at it after a market wage for yourself, and a lot of people aren't doing that. Hence the comment earlier about what's left for us. That's how people think about their wage. Oh look, I've paid all my expenses, I've got something left, happy days, I've made a good living. Not the same as profitable after a market wage. And that's a really important discipline, back to that word, to have in your business. Because if you're not paying yourself a wage, you're actually not profitable, and therefore you're not thriving. So that's enough of the language of profitability. Now let's talk about that returns word, the first of the 4 R words. What do returns look like and what does that mean? Again, for those that were here last year, you'll remember I gave you 2 key numbers. Gross profit, gross margin we call it, 72%, and EBIT margin, 27%. What is a margin? A margin is the number of the EBIT divided by the revenue, the number of the gross profit divided by the revenue. That's the margin. Now, these numbers are really convenient because they're both multiples of 9 and they both are just reciprocals of each other. They're easy to remember, 72 and 27. If you're not hitting those numbers, you're not actually sufficiently profitable. You could be doing better. How do I know that? Because we've looked at an endless number of clinics now at NCP. It's your data. We've taken your data, we've put it across a series of spreadsheets, and we've analysed it. The good clinics are consistently achieving, in fact, a lot more than 72% at the gross profit line, often in the high 70s, sometimes in the low 80s. Certainly you have to be above 72. It's a really clear benchmark. And the same with the EBIT margin. Many clinics are literally in the single digit, just profitable. And that's not profitable because a lot of them aren't even looking at their own wage. That's what they take home, and it's single digits multiples of EBIT margin. 27% is where you should be. Many clinics are achieving high teens, low 20s. Getting to 27 is a special category, and there is a science to it. So let's talk about that for a little bit as well. I talked about the fact that we've analysed many clinics. This is a sample of them. I presented this last year. I'm doing it again because it's an important part of this dimension, the profitability dimension. So 27% is that magic number we're trying to be above. Of the 15 clinics that I've presented there, 10 of them are achieving it, 5 of them are not. This is real data. So it's really interesting to see that some of them are achieving it and some of them aren't. And what we've done is a fair bit of time understanding why that is, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We then look at how those clinics are performing at the gross margin level. The ones that are not coloured here all achieved the gross margin target of 72 plus. So the non-coloured ones, right? Most clinics out there are achieving 72 plus at the gross margin level, yet many are not achieving the profitability benchmark at the EBIT level. Why is that? I'm going to use some French here. They piss it away. And that's a really crude thing to say, but there are many, many, many areas of leakage that happen between the gross margin level and the EBIT level, and understanding what those are, and frankly, how to diagnose them and then how to fix them is the key. What's also interesting is that just because you're achieving the gross margin level does not mean you're achieving the EBIT margin level. So those three, for example, that I've shown there, they all achieved the gross margin level actually quite comfortably, yet they did not achieve, in fact, the last one on the right there achieved zero profit. All of that work and zero profit. So as we talk through the rest of this presentation, the key numbers again, just to repeat them, 72 at the gross margin level, 27 at the EBIT margin level, and to break it down even further, within that wages and OPEX bucket, your wages should be about 30% of revenue, and ideally not more, in fact kind of critically not more, and your OPEX should be 15% of revenue and not more. If you're breaking those, it becomes hard to achieve the EBIT margin threshold. So what's sustainable? Sustainable, repeatable, that was the R word. I look at it as two different things. There's sustainable at a revenue level, and there's sustainable at a margin level. And that's both gross margin and EBIT margin that we just spoke about. So let's look at revenue first. What does sustainable at the revenue level look like? The question you have to ask yourself is my revenue self-generating? Of course it's not, because you're there working, and so is your team, but is it self-generating? And I'll explain that in a minute. Or is it effort-driven? And again, you're going to tell me, of course it's effort-driven, I'm working hard. That's not the point. Self-generating means it's not that hard. Your clients come back, you're rebooking them. You've got treatment plans for them. You've actually got Susie's famous prescriptive cycle going. You've got a great referral network. People are coming because they know about your business, they're already clients, or they're being referred by people they know. It's relatively, and that's the important word I guess, relatively easy for you to continue to sustain your business because it self-generates. The flip side is effort-driven. Your clients are one-off and they don't come back again. You're having to advertise an inordinate amount and spend money doing that in order to attract your customers. I was speaking to a clinic recently and their advertising numbers are really high compared with benchmark. And I said to them, you know, your advertising looks higher than it probably needs to be. Should we be normalising that? The reason I asked that question is because at NCP, where we're partnering with clinics to put a group together and then bring an investor in, we want to help clinics present the best version of themselves to the market and to the investor when they come in, because that will get more money for the clinicians. So we're trying to help make that look good. And I said to this clinic, can we normalise this advertising expenditure? Do you think there's some one-offs going on here? Is there any way that we can not spend that much going forward and therefore actually get a higher price for your business for you? Oh, no, because if we didn't spend that money, and it was a lot of money, if we didn't spend that money, we'd have no business. And there's a really sad example in a way of effort-driven and not sustainable and not generating the rewards. So there's a lot of science behind all this, of course, but why are you having to spend so much money to keep your business sustainable? Everyone needs some level, no problem, but it's all within benchmarks. And there's, again, from our analysis, there are well-established benchmarks. Are you having to discount to get your customers? This is the difference between self-generating equals sustainable and effort-driven, which is not sustainable. Now, the margin side of things. So we talked about the two margins, gross margin and EBIT margin. Gross margin is the margin that you create yourself. So you create that through the price that you charge the market for your services. You create it through the mix of services that you offer. Some services have really high gross margins. Some have really low. Interestingly, injectables have a lower gross margin on average. Why? Because there's a high cost of product. energy devices, you've bought the device. Some of them have input costs, some don't. They tend to have higher gross margins. Skincare is mixed. So the mix of your services can dramatically impact your gross margin. And of course, discounting is the opposite of pricing. That erodes your gross margin. Once you've created your gross margin, it's then how much do you get to keep? Remember, the EBIT is what you get to keep pre-tax. So how do you retain that margin once you've created it? And the answer is your labour mix correct? Do you have too many non-productive staff, receptionists, business unit managers, etc.? Are you paying your labour too much? Importantly, and probably the most critical one with labour is your labour effectively utilised? Are they productive? There's two concepts there. Are they working productively, meaning billing clients for the hours they're there? That's the utilisation point. And then the productive point is, are they billing clients enough for the time they're actually billing clients? And so there's productivity, utilisation and productivity. So is your labour generating the returns it should be? And then the overheads. And the overheads is everything else. And the big ones, if we think about it, are what's your rent? Rent's the biggest one in the overheads. So have you got your rent structured correctly? Is your insurance appropriately covered but also correctly priced? These things are all actually negotiable. And what actually happens in business, and I know this with my own business, is the accountant tells you this year, look, it's really bad, inflation's happened, costs have gone up, it's costing us a lot more. Bad luck, unfortunately, I'm going to have to charge you an extra $5,000 for the same thing this year. And you think, oh, you know, that sounds horrible, I'll try and negotiate. No, I've got to charge you it. okay, and you resent it, and you resent it again, and you resent it again, but you never do anything about it. And in fact, for me this year, after maybe 5 years of that, I've just gone, this is way too much, and I've now phoned someone else to get a referral to their accountant, and I'm changing. There is the opportunity to work on your OPEX, and there's a big area that people get lazy on and don't address, that it's low-hanging fruit. So that's about the margin that you retain, and that's about sustainability. Now let's talk about scalability. So what makes a business scalable? And if you remember the R word that I used, it was replicable. So let's talk about that. Here's our little memory item for what a business should look like. 72, 27 with the 30 and the 15 in the middle. These are the numbers that should be imprinted on your brains. So, scalable. Can we grow from that size business to that size business? Can we double our business? Well, that's great if you can double your business, but that's not enough. Can you grow your business while retaining the same structure of 72, 27 with 30 and 15 in the middle? That's what scalable looks like. Scalable is having the ability to increase the size of your business while replicating the profitability, hence the replicable word. Okay, so let's look at that. What does it take to do that? There are building blocks that are needed. The first is you have to have capacity in your business. What does that mean? It means, do you have a spare room or two or three? Can you move somewhere else where you will have a spare room or two or three? Do you have enough staff and the right staff to grow your business? And frankly, are those staff empowered properly and actually performing with good utilisation, good productivity, but with capacity, either in existing staff, hopefully not because then they weren't utilised, but hopefully with new staff that you have the ability to bring in, train, empower and replicate? Can you grow your business with those building blocks? Importantly is you and the management team you've put around you, your business manager and others. Do you have the management required to actually allow you to take advantage of that scalability? It's great you've got capacity or can create it. It's great that you've got staffing or can create it. Can you actually manage it? And that's really hard, actually. That's where a lot of people fall down. Why do they fall down, though? It could be in themselves, it could be an ability thing, sure, but what it often is actually the next layer, which is a systems thing. In order to scale, it's impossible for it to be about you anymore. And this is the massive gap. I haven't scaled my advisory business, Cardinal Mark. It's literally me with 3 people. Why haven't I done that? Well, the true answer is I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to create systems in an investment banking business where I feel that I want to manage or can manage a bigger team of people and replicate my profitability. Because I bring another one of me in, they're going to want to earn as much as I am earning. So how do I make any extra money out of that? How is my business scalable? I don't know how to do that. That's the honest truth. I've chosen not to, partly as an excuse because I don't know how, but partly because I've also spent years managing big teams and frankly, I don't want to do it anymore. So anyway, it's not an easy thing to do to create the system around your business that allows your management skills to be systemized and therefore to empower and enable your capacity. But that is what it takes if you want to be scalable. And I've seen clinic businesses do it. I've seen businesses that have grown from zero to being worth, I don't know, 15 million bucks in 4 years. Staggering. There's a special something there. But that is the source. It's having the systems to put around the ecosystem. And then, of course, once you've done all that, it'd be a shame if you did that and didn't have the demand. So you'd better make sure that you understand your market, your customer base, how you're going to get the extra customers so that you can, in fact, fill that capacity and deliver the extra replicable scale that you've just created. So the last one of them, transferable. And the R word that goes with that was replaceable. Are you replaceable? Can your business be transferred to someone else without you? And by the way, have you even thought about that as an idea? And why is that important? Because at the end of the day, you've all spent an inordinate amount of time building your businesses, probably from scratch. Your literally heart and minds and soul have gone into it every single day. No doubt it's exhausting. And at the end of the day, is that worth something? Or are you going to retire one day and just shut it? That would be a shame because, in fact, if it's profitable and sustainable and scalable, if only you could make it transferable, there's more money to be made out of that business as you exit and as you retire. So that's the holy grail, is actually converting all of those other R words into the replaceable word. So what's the key question here? Do you work for the business yourself, or does your business in fact work for you? That's an important question. My advisory business, actually, I work for it. So don't do what I do. But the reality is it's really hard to create, it's actually the replicability, frankly, and the sustainability. Be profitable, then be sustainable, then be scalable. And if you can do all of that, the chances are you've actually created transferability already in doing that. Because in order to be each of those other things, you have to have created a business that can in fact operate without you. It is impossible to scale if you're still the one doing it. So by definition, if you've achieved the other things, you're probably a long way along the road to achieving transferability. And that's the ultimate holy grail. Are your client relationships shared, or is it just you? If it's just you, you have no hope of being transferable, because when you go, there will be no clients. That's my advisory business. It's not transferable. Don't be like that in this business. There's no reason not to. It's about having the confidence, and I appreciate that staff turnover is high and that there are many examples of your staff leaving and starting somewhere else and taking your customers. So I totally get, to borrow Janine's words, the fear associated with letting other people attach to your client relationships. But there's a magic to being able to do that while still retaining them and building an ecosystem where they still come to your clinic, even though you're not the one necessarily providing the service. Your team is empowered to do that, yet the service is still under your brand and still something the customers identify with. So are your relationships shared? If they're not, you won't be able to transfer your business. Do you have standard operating procedures in place? Are they documented and importantly taught, lived and breathed? And do you have the capacity and the capability to train new people on those and have them perform at scale rapidly, such that when you lose a staff member, it's not a disaster, but it's just a normal cycle of business, not effortless, but less effortful, to replace those people and bring them in and have them operating, have them empowered and have them continuing to replicate what you've already built. And it really does come down to those systems and processes in your business. And by the way, I must say, I'm not the expert at implementing this, but I know who is, and it's Susie. So I'm here to tell you what I've observed, but I can't tell you exactly how to fix it. What I can is tell you who can fix it, and I know someone there. But anyway, this is my observations. Can the business exist without you? Obviously, that's the same as transferable. It's an obvious question, but it has to be able to exist without you. And is there a credible exit pathway? Is there someone who actually will buy your business? The reality is, if there's not a group buying your business, and by the way, that's what we're trying to do at NCP, is help people link up with the capital to exit their businesses. But if it wasn't for, say, someone like us doing that, where would you sell your business? The answer is, really, it comes down to finding another clinician who's willing to come in and maybe pay you out over a couple of years so that you can go and they can take over. Or maybe it's someone in your business already that will do the same thing and take you out. What are you earning for that? 1 times your revenue, 2 times your revenue, not even, times your EBIT maybe? Kind of nothing. It's really hard. And the bigger you get, ironically, the harder it is to actually achieve that, because who can afford to actually pay you out? So is there a credible exit pathway? And importantly, do you know what it takes in your business to make that a real pathway and to actually deliver that as a solution for yourself? Now, most people are not thinking about that because you're too busy in your business running it day to day, and that's appropriate. You are doing that, but here's the thing. It's going to come really fast when you are thinking about that, and if you haven't already got everything in place to be able to deliver that, it's too late. I talked last year about the life cycle of business, and we often see people coming to us when they've been through the phase where they've established their business, they've grown their business, it inevitably gets to a plateau, not inevitably, but very often gets to a plateau, and then it comes off as they start to think about more holidays and more retirement style activities. If you're at the plateau, you're kind of too late. If you're after the plateau, you're definitely too late and you will not sell your business. So thinking about selling your business while you're still growing it, it sounds highly counterintuitive, but that is actually the right answer. So I said I don't know how to fix these things. I kind of don't, but I do know what I've observed about why clinics fail to thrive. And so I'll talk about that for a little bit. I'm going to put all the words up at once and we'll just have a quick pause and look at them. So underpricing your services. If you're not charging enough to your customers, how can you hope to create the gross margin that then you can hope to retain at the EBIT level? You've got to be charging the right amount of money. That's a fundamental problem, and I'm going to demonstrate that in a second. Gross margin. You're spending too much on your supply. You're not procuring well. Now, hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully, you've all got a pretty good deal from the suppliers. You probably want to cross-check with your peers on that one, because there is a lot of money there if you're not. So are you purchasing correctly, and is your mix right? Are you offering the services? Do you even know what your gross margin per service is? A lot of people don't. You need to know what your gross margin per service is. And then you need to think about how you're going to structure your business and empower your team and encourage your team to be prescribing the right services so that you do get the best gross margin. Did you know that back in the day I was selling Rebel Sport? And at Rebel Sport, if you were in the know, on every single little barcode on the product, there was a 2-letter code, and it was a really simple code. So if the code was, let me just think how well I can count the alphabet here. I'm going to do some really easy ones. BD, that's 2, B is 2, D is 4, 24% gross margin. Why was that there? So the salesperson, when they were trying to sell you that soccer ball or that soccer ball, ooh, look at this. This one's the highest gross margin soccer ball. This is the one we recommend. Isn't that extraordinary? But there you go. That's a bit of very basic retail science. They knew what their gross margin was, and they knew that if you maximise gross margin, you're going to give yourself the best shot of retaining it at the EBIT margin level. So knowing the gross margin of your services and actually structuring your business in a way that you're optimising that is important. Labour inefficiency. I talked about that a little bit before. This one is a massive killer, and I see it so often, all the time. And it's a really hard one because, frankly, labour, wages, people are hard to deal with. How do you get the people to do what you want them to do and to be efficient in doing so? How do you encourage clinicians that are not really profit-minded often to actually think about the gross margin, like the Rebel Sport example, and actually care about that, but actually do it with integrity, not feeling like they're selling something, but actually they're doing something that happens to make money, but actually is the right outcome for the patient. These are the challenges of labour management. But many businesses, for example, are not prescribing enough skincare product along with the services they provide. And that's low-hanging fruit. You know, you can generate a lot more skincare sales, and it's for the good of your customers. You don't have to be embarrassed doing that. You're not selling, you're actually providing something that's going to enhance the service that you're giving and give it longevity and replicability, dare I say it. So labour inefficiency, people that are sitting around not doing enough. Well, first of all, are you, your staff's there, there's handover, there's cleaning the rooms, there's lunch breaks, there's toilet breaks, whatever it is. That is all training time. That's all time that takes away from actually having billable hours or bookable hours. So first, that's your first leakage, is you're not getting enough bookable hours. So where is that leakage happening, and can it be more efficient? The second is, are you then using those bookable hours, and this is what we call utilisation. So in other words, are patients there with the right amount of time allocated to each patient and not more? And is every moment of bookable hours, let's allow the leakage, but is every moment of bookable hours being booked and paid for? And then in those bookable hours that are actually being utilised, is there enough money, dare I say that dirty word, being generated from that utilisation? In other words, are you productive? So are you bookable, are you utilised, and are you productive? That's labour efficiency. So labour inefficiency is a massive reason, possibly even the number one actually, as to why clinics are failing to thrive. Overhead leakage, I did speak about that before. The reality is there's this 15%-ish bucket of costs out there that people tend to ignore. Spend the time looking at that, because there is, you know, surprising how the small numbers add up, and overhead leakage can be a bit of a killer. Weak systems, I talked about the building blocks of scalability. I talked about capacity and staffing and management, the systems around that. And again, that is the secret sauce. It's actually, how do you create the ability to replicate yourself when it's not you? And that's the secret to freedom, frankly. And finally, founder concentration. What does that mean? It doesn't mean, are you concentrating at work? I hope you are. It does not mean that. What it means is, are you the sole source of this business and the sole engine of it? Because if you are, you will never sell that business. It's founder concentration. So can you empower your team? Do you have the systems around that to allow you to do that? Because if you can't, then you're not going to thrive, because you're not going to be transferable. So these are some of the reasons. So here's some of the things you might hear yourself saying to yourself if you're failing to achieve some of these things. We're always busy, but our profit's low. Why is that? Like, people don't know, actually. We're always busy. My God, we're so busy, but we're not making money. Why? Because you're probably not charging enough. I hate to say it, because you're all going to tell me you are, but I bet you're not. It's surprising how inelastic demand can be. In other words, time and time again, I see boards of directors in big companies saying, oh, we can't possibly put prices up, because if we do, we'll lose our business. But your selling proposition is so much more than your price. And so actually, there probably is something in that. And I'm not advocating that you all go out and put your prices up 30% and lose your business. That is not my advice. I'm not giving you advice here, but what I am saying is, think about that very carefully, because back to Janine's fear thing, people are scared they're going to lose their business if they play with the prices. Test it out. Give it a go. See what you can do. We're always busy, but profit is low. Are you purchasing correctly? Have a look at that. Talk to other people in the industry. Benchmark what's being achieved from the suppliers. Get into buying groups. People are doing that now. Maybe you're all doing it already. But get into buying groups, because scale does achieve huge benefits. And so a buying group can achieve that scale and can get much, much better pricing than any individual clinic can get standalone. And the mix of your services, I've spoken about that again already, but just to repeat, are you selling is the wrong word, are you delivering, in fact, the services that will generate the highest Rebel Sport gross margin to you? We're always busy, but profit is low. There's your problem, most likely. The next one. Our gross margin, I'm sure you don't use that word, probably, but nevertheless, we're earning a lot of money coming through the front door, but it just won't stick, meaning we get to the end of the year and, my God, there's not a lot of money left. Why is that? Why won't it stick? Because your labour isn't balanced correctly. It's not, you haven't got the right staff in place, you've got too much labour overhead, you've got not enough bookable hours, you're wasting too much time unproductively. Of those bookable hours, you're not actually utilising them fully. And if you are utilising them fully, you're not actually generating enough productivity from them. There's the 4 layers of labour inefficiency. And overhead leakage, that's that 15% bucket. You're not actually dealing with your cost structure, you're not checking those small items and you're not fixing them. So our gross margin is fine, but it just won't stick. And then lastly, this is the big one. It's impossible to get off the tools. It comes back to that thing I wrote before, which was, are you working for the business or is the business working for you? And ultimately, the secret to liberation in business and to enjoying your business and to freedom in business is to have the business working for you. How do you get yourself off the tools? You have to have systems. And you have to be able to have the confidence to get off the founder concentration. I'm going to show you a little bit of a worked example. Don't worry about the specific numbers because they're obviously A, very small, B, lots of them, and C, weirdly specific. What this is basically a model that we've built. It's not a model of any one clinic. It's a model based on our benchmarking, and basically we sat down and tried to replicate what a clinic looks like in some detail. Behind all of this is a lot of detail. So it literally goes into each staff member, what each staff member might be paid per hour, how many hours they're there, how many hours is bookable, how many hours is utilised, what's the productivity of that, what's the average visit value per type of service, what's the gross margin per type of service. It's built up from the bottom, right? So this is a proper operating model for any one of your businesses, and it goes into micro detail. And what comes out is these numbers here. And so the reason I'm showing you this is just to experiment through this model with what some of those failure modes actually do to profit. So the things to note with this, first of all, it's a $2.5 million clinic. That's not abnormal. Out of all the clinics we look at, probably on average, you're somewhere between, I don't know, the high 1s and the high 2s. So 2.5 is kind of a reasonable level of expected revenue for a clinic business that's sort of profitable and might not be thriving, but is hitting the right starting point. 2.5 million, call it that. The next thing to note is the gross margin there. The gross margin of this clinic is actually 76%. So it's a lot higher than the 72 benchmark, but is actually consistent with what we see on average across the industry. A lot of people are in the high 70s. 72 is an absolute minimum. So this is a clinic that's pretty normal. It's in the high 70s. Okay, the next thing, wages. Now look at this one. It's circled with a yellowy, orangey, khaki colour there. Why is that? Because, have a guess what? It's more than 30. That's not good. No. But you know what? Really interestingly, in me creating my model clinic, I was unable to get my wages below the 30% benchmark. Now I can spend longer playing with that and get it there, but I wanted to show you this to make it a little bit real. This clinic is slightly overspending on its wages. It's a doctor-owned clinic. That doesn't help it. Why? Because in our sort of conceptualization of the market model, we allocate a higher wage as a market wage to doctors than we do to nurses, just the way it is. And so that this doctor clinic has a higher wage burden than the equivalent nurse clinic would. We've also modelled a nurse clinic, but I put this one up because it illustrates an interesting point. Here is a clinic that's not quite meeting the wage outcome. But interestingly, it is appropriate on the OPEX. It's below 15%, just about, same, 15%. So it's perfectly fine on the OPEX. And at the EBIT line, interestingly, despite being over on wages, it's over the 27% magic number. Why is that? Because the gross margin is so much higher. So this goes to my point. If you can create the profit at the gross margin level, how much easier is it to keep it at the bottom level? Because this clinic is creating above benchmark gross profit, it has some room to be a little out of line in the other items and still be profitable. And it's making 700 grand at the end of the year after paying the wage of the principal. Highly profitable. That's $700,000 that you as the owner get to keep on top of paying yourself a market wage. That's profitable. That's what a good clinic looks like. Okay, so let's now look at what happens when this good clinic fails? So, first of all, what if you're undercharging the market, your customers, by 10%? That's not very much. 10%. Like literally, you're charging a service that's $400 and it's $440. Your customers aren't going to notice, almost certainly. It's nothing. 10%. Let's look how bad this is. Okay, so the first thing is your average visit value goes from 543 down to 488. That's where this comes into the model. It's how we reflect pricing. The average visit value is down because you're underpricing it. Instantly, look at the red dots and compare each of those lines between the model clinic on the left and the 10% underpriced clinic on the right. A massive drop in revenue straight away. That flows through to a massive drop in gross profit, and it flows through to a massive drop in EBIT. And the EBIT at 490 is way below benchmark. And let's look at that in a percentage sense. Because the gross profit falls due to the pricing flowing through revenue, because the gross profit falls, you would think you're going to fail to meet the benchmark. But interestingly here with the green dot, you're still meeting the benchmark of 72. So you think to yourself, oh look, I'm meeting my gross margin benchmark, I'm okay. But you're not okay because we already know we've actually discounted price by 10% here. So this is the thing. Some of this stuff can happen in your business without you knowing it's happening. You don't know, looking at these numbers here, that you're underpricing by 10% because your gross margin looks fine. Yet I know you are because I just modelled it. So that's the trick. The tricky bit is that it can be hidden. So that's why testing is important, not just thinking you're meeting the numbers. But let's continue down the P&L. So we already said that the wages, look at the yellow dot there, the wages are slightly over already, but because the revenue's now fallen, the percentage of revenue that's represented by wages, because wages are fixed in this context, the percentage of revenue is much, much worse. 37%, 36%. And then look at the next line. It went from 14% up to 15.8. Not that bad. It's nearly 15. So it's a yellow dot, not a red dot. But the total effect of that is a disaster. You've gone from 27%, 29% in this case, the benchmark of 27, you've gone down to 21%. You've instantly screwed your business, like really badly. 10% in price only. Okay, even small pricing changes can destroy margin. And the next one I'm going to show you really quickly, utilisation. And we talked about this. This is the labour management thing. If your people are sitting around not actually being occupied productively, then you are losing money. And what does that look like? So here we do the same exercise, right? This time though, it's not the average visit value that gets affected, it's now the number of visits, because you haven't got people available productively to see patients, to see clients. And so the consequence is it hits the number of visits. It goes from 4,500 visits a year down to 4,000-ish. What does that mean? Again, it instantly hits revenue. Interestingly, this time though, because seeing a client has a gross profit attaching to it, you actually reduce the cost of sales. Less visits, yeah, less revenue, but also less cost of sales. So you get a bit of a freebie that kind of helps you out a touch here. But it still hits your gross profit because your revenues come down. It still hits your EBIT. That's the red dots there. And then finally, this time, because it's not actually hitting, because it hits your revenue and your cost of sales, it doesn't affect your gross profit margin. So that number there is exactly the same. You're still at 76%. But what happens is, because your revenue's fallen so much, because you're not seeing enough patients, suddenly your wages blow out even worse than they blew out before. So the utilisation of 10 percentage points underutilised, instead of being 75% utilised, you're 65% utilised, to put it in real terms. There is a significant problem at the wage line. The same problem, it's not that big a problem, but the same problem at the OPEX line because the revenue's down. And again, a very similar outcome at the bottom line. So you can see how these changes that don't sound that big are catastrophic. And that's how hard, but also how easy it can be to get it right, and also how easy it can be to get it wrong. Idle capacity destroys your returns. All right, well that was a lot, but now let's talk about the conclusion then to try and bring it all together. Thriving is a system. You are thriving if you're profitable, generating the right returns, the magic numbers. You're thriving if you're sustainable. You can repeat that profit day after day after day without inordinate amounts of effort. You're thriving if you're scalable. You can take today's profit, grow your business and maintain the same profit structure. And you're thriving if you're transferable. You can replace yourself in the business. And any one of those that breaks means you're not thriving and the model has failed for you. So what to remember? Live the 4 R's. Understand the links between your actions and your outcomes. Bluntly, if you had the capability, capacity, inclination, build yourself that model of your business so that you can test things and see what the impact is. And if you don't know how to do that, get your accountant to help you. I can't tell you, like that was really, really clear to me when I saw that. 10% of price, profit's gone. So build a model so you know that, you can test what it will do and you can see how it all works through your business. Focus on the returns, not just the income. It's not, are you making enough money at the end of the day to take home? It's, are the returns working in your business? Are you making the amount of money you should be making from your business? Why is revenue so hard to get and margin so hard to keep? We talked a lot about that. Put in place the building blocks for growth. The capacity's fine, the management's harder, the systems are even harder. Put in place the building blocks for growth. Train and empower your team. It can't just be you, it has to be the team that is servicing the relationships, delivering the productivity, and actually creating the outcomes for you. Planning your exit pathway. Most people are not doing this. Plan it before you think you should even be thinking about it. Plan your exit pathway. And finally, remember, surviving, which is what most of us are doing in business, is not thriving, and get help. And if you want to talk about any of that any further, that's who I am. Take a photo of that. The little QR code links to National Cosmetic Partnership's website. There's a web form there, but take a photo and feel free to send me a text or something. I'm happy to talk about it. Happy to help you benchmark your business. Get some help.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. He's just incredible, isn't he? Every time, like I say, every time I speak to Andrew, I learn something.